And we are live. Well, hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of Facebook Live Session with us, Aisha Sherzai and Dean Sherzai. I introduced you this time.
It's okay. I can live with that.
So welcome. And today we are going to talk about probably one of the most important topics and issues that we have dealing with cognitive impairment and brain health in general. And it is sugar consumption. So sugar, and this is a phrase that we use most of the time with our patients, sugar to us is the poison of the 21st century. And the reason is that it has been associated with so many diseases. The American Heart Association has taken the lead of making rules and regulations about sugar consumption. And the reason is that in large research studies, sugar consumption has been associated with different diseases, stroke and cardiovascular disease. And we are just going to spend about 20 or 30 minutes talking about sugar today. But for more information, you can always go and pre-order our book, The Alzheimer's Solution, which you can find on our website. And we have a dedicated section to nutrition in general, but specifically on sugar and what it really does to your brain. So let's start talking about this. So why is sugar bad? And why is it bad at this day and age in our environment, in our society? Well, there's been recommendations to limit sugar based on the research studies. We now know that sugar consumption, American Heart Association says that your daily caloric intake from sugar should be less than 5%. But right now, the population in the US, they consume more than 15% of their daily caloric intake coming from sugar.
Added sugar.
Yeah, added sugar. And that's exactly where cardiovascular diseases actually start. And at about 25%, if you take 25% of your caloric intake from pure sugar, added sugar, you actually double your risk for cardiovascular disease, which is heart attack and stroke. And if it's more, it just continuously rises. So because of this overconsumption, we're seeing a lot of diseases. And right now, about 75% of all of our packaged foods, even if it doesn't say that it has, it is related to a sweet food, it actually has sugar. And the sugar is used as preservatives and other things that improve the texture. So it's very, very important for us to
And many
understand
different
that.
names, from sucrose, fructose, glucose, cornstarch, all different kinds of names, but it is literally basically just that simple sugar.
A lot of our patients come into us and ask us, oh, is agave syrup better? Or say, for example, some of the other types of sugar. But, our answer usually is sugar is sugar.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what name it has. And evolutionarily, we're kind of hardwired to like sweet foods.
We are. I mean, imagine now, whenever we want to get any kind of food, go to a supermarket, you have aisles of fruits, vegetables, all kinds of products from protein, carbohydrates, simple sugars, complex sugars. It's available 12 months a year continuously. Well, that wasn't the case for thousands, if not millions of years. That wasn't the case when it came to sugar. Sugar was a rarity. We were lucky to have a fruit seasonally in your region, and only one type of that.
Absolutely.
And so it was a rarity. And the body craved it because it was a high source of energy. In fact, there's evidence that we become as addicted to sugar as any other drug. And we see the evidence of that. And that the evidence is most relevant when it comes to marketing, because it's in everything. As soon as you start becoming a little more savvy about reading sugar in packaging, you see that it's in everything, and things that you wouldn't even think about. Ketchup.
Ketchup has a lot of sugar.
Dressings.
Pasta sauces, salad dressing.
And then my favorite, salad dressing for diet. And then underneath you read it has more sugar than you could get in any drink.
Can you expand a little bit about this controversy or this change in perspective about or this continuous war between sugar and fat. You know, there was a time when fat was bad, 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 and then now we're saying, no, it's actually sugar that is bad. What are your thoughts?
It's all marketing. Reality is we are talking about evolution. They keep bringing these concepts of paleo and the fact that we evolved with this thing. For majority of our existence, millions of years, we were meant to live 20 years, 30 years, reproduce and die. Hopefully not in that quick an order, but basically for many, yes. Reproduce and die. And the idea of living to 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90 and 100, unheard of.
Was rare.
There's actually some statistics that were done that more than 70% of all the people that were ever alive past the age of 65 are alive now.
Yeah.
So, yes, if you want to have a fast, rapid life, absolutely, do everything you want. This is not the conversation for you. If you want to live a healthy life well in your 60s, 70s, 90s, 100, especially cognitively healthy.
Absolutely.
What's the point of having a healthy heart when the point of this whole body, the brain, is not functioning well? Short of dementia. We talk about dementia all the time and Alzheimer's all the time, that after the age of 85, 50% have dementia. After the age of 65, 15 to 20% have dementia. But we never talk about general cognitive decline. That can be avoided. Okay, getting back evolutionarily, the brain, this amazing organ, 3 pounds, you'll hear this multiple times, we have it here, this 3-pound organ, and this 2% of the body's weight actually consumes 25%. And when you give it sugar, which it needs, and another conversation we'll talk about other sources like ketones and this whole controversy about coconut oil. Those are not direct sources for the brain. The direct source is glucose. This brain is, if you overwhelm it with the glucose, it's going to actually destroy the brain. And I give the example of this car, Pinto. I know I'm aging myself. It's an old car. And putting that on nitro, continuous full energy, 24 hours, it's going to burn that engine. Yeah. One of the components of the problem of degenerative diseases is getting sugar creates the most. It's the central, Krebs cycle. It's the central place where we create energy and waste products. So, evolutionarily, we crave energy because we wanted to live fast, have enough energy, but the amount that we have now, the extent of sugar that we have in our diets now, overwhelms our system. We have now epidemics of diabetes in children. Yeah. We have type 2 diabetes. We have hyperglycemia and insulin resistance. These are the different levels. And the research is just replete. I mean, absolutely. There's plenty of evidence that when it comes to the brain, not diabetes, absolutely. There are several studies that show that it doubles the risk of dementia. We did that showed that the risk of 8 million people, that the risk of Alzheimer's increases significantly with those who have diabetes. Insulin resistance, which means when the sugar levels go high, what happens is the body is not able to process it well. It gets shocked. So the insulin receptors, these are the keys, the locks, they're internalized, so you don't have the receptor. So you have sugar everywhere, yet the cells are starving because you shocked it, so the lock was internalized. And now that insulin resistance is actually one of the earlier signs that we check in our clinics of brain disease, damage to the brain early on. So that's another level. And we just did a paper that will be published with cognitive decline and lower cognitive state and dementia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But even before that, there are some papers that show that even if you don't have insulin resistance or diabetes, repeated elevated levels of glucose, sustained levels of high glucose, has a negative effect on the brain.
Exactly. So you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis of diabetes to actually have, a harm to your brain. Basically, there is always a threshold where when your glucose levels go beyond that threshold, they tell you you have diabetes and you need to be on medication. But we know, like you said, that even if it's on the trend towards that threshold, your brain is actually being damaged.
Correct, correct. I mean, we know that when there's insulin resistance, the insulin levels go up. The enzymes that are designed to break down that insulin, excessive insulin, are going to be overoccupied, so they can't get rid of the other waste products, such as amyloid, which is usually accumulating in Alzheimer's, and other waste products. Sugar itself, elevated sugar itself, creates osmotic imbalances, which means movement of fluid between cells, and starts damaging the cell. And definitely diabetes, fulminant diabetes, puts the entire cell in danger from its immune system that is lowered, to the garbage disposable systems of the cell itself, lysosomal system, that are damaged, and then the risk of Alzheimer's goes significantly higher.
Absolutely.
In relationship to what you were talking about earlier, there are these people saying that, oh, sugar is important, but fat is more important, and others saying, no, fat is not important, sugar is important.
Yes.
Reality is that both of those are important. Excessive amounts of, especially saturated fats.
Yeah.
There's no question anymore. I don't know why this controversy that, excessive saturated fat is not bad. It is bad. There is no controversy among those who have studied the data extensively. And sugar as well.
And we'll talk about fats and what kind of fats are bad for the brain at a separate session.
Absolutely.
I think that's a very, very important topic to have had. And like you said, there's a lot of controversy behind it as well.
It's interesting that actually recently there are some studies going as far as treating sugar levels, high sugar levels, and its relationship to dementia. I think one of the questions alluded to that, and we will get to that. Absolutely.
So that's great. So if you have to put it in a nutshell, glucose can damage the brain in multiple ways.
Yeah.
And, one doesn't necessarily have to have diabetes to be at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease, which is kind of scary, because if they're individuals like myself with a family history of Alzheimer's disease, you tend to worry, okay, so what should I do? How much is too much? How do I measure or calculate the amount of glucose or sugar that I eat? So those are some of the things that we actually go into depth in the book. But right now, I would love for us to address some of the questions that we have had. Thanks to some of you who have inboxed us or who have replied to our posts. I'm just going to read off some of the questions.
Before we go on, and so some of the people are used to it now. They send us questions beforehand. It would be great that if you can ask questions at the same time.
And you can ask questions right now too.
Exactly. But even if you have some really formed questions ahead of time, inbox us and we'll share it in our sessions.
Absolutely. So one of the questions that we had, and I love this question, is what about fruits? Fruits are sweet and they have fructose in them. And so are you trying to tell us not to eat any fruits? And so the answer is no. We're not saying you shouldn't eat fruits. Actually, fruits are very, very good for you. So the way it works, the natural fructose, or the fruit sugar that is bound with all the fiber and with all the other micronutrients and the antioxidants with the fruit, it keeps on being bound to that fiber. Yes. In the gut. And so the whole fruit itself slows down the release of sugar. Like, for example, if you drink a can of Coke, say for example, yes. There's nothing, it's just pure water and sugar, and then you're going to get a sudden spike in your blood concentration right away.
There's some other stuff, because I've seen these commercials where it actually takes the paint off the car. So whatever that is, that's not good for you either.
It's not good for you. None of the components in a can of soda is good for you.
No.
But when it comes to, say for example, if you compare a can of Coke with some pureed fruit, what happens is the glucose slowly and gradually keeps on, getting into your bloodstream, and it keeps it bound until it gets to the intestine. So it gives your body some time to be able to absorb it well.
It speaks to the very important concept that we discuss in the book in depth.
Yes.
In a fun way, don't worry. It's a low glycemic and high glycemic index.
Correct.
It's not about just sugar. It's about how the body receives it and how the body was used to it. It also answers a lot of these other people who've written things about, grains and not eating, grains.
The militaristic approach towards sugar, and also confusing carbohydrates and sugar.
Exactly.
There are people who say carbs are bad, period. that is not true. There are different types of carbohydrates.
Correct.
We're talking about the simplest form of carbohydrates,
Correct.
which is pure sugar.
And speaking to low glycemic versus high glycemic.
Correct. So like you said, so the low glycemic foods are the ones that are slowly absorbed into the body, and those are the ones that we actually want to consume. As a matter of fact, foods that have a lot of fiber. Let me talk about beans.
Yes.
What a phenomenal thing beans are. So beans have been studied extensively as to what they do as far as body sugars are concerned. And there is this terminology or phrase that is either lentil effect or second meal effect. So what happens when we eat beans or
Yes.
lentils or any kind of legumes, yes, you're going to get a slow spike in the glucose in your blood vessels. But even after the first meal, say for example you had a bean burrito for lunch, if you eat something that is a little sweeter and higher glycemic for dinner, that bean actually keeps the sugar bound into your
Exactly.
gut. So it feeds your gut bacteria and it slows down the release of glucose. So basically what this means is that if we eat a whole food plant-based diet,
Correct.
essentially, it moderates the level of glucose in the body.
Absolutely. We will have an entire session on beans and lentils and legumes, their magical qualities, but we'll talk about that some other time.
Absolutely.
But the low glycemic and high glycemic, it's very important to kind of educate ourselves about that. And that's where all the confusion rests.
Yes.
And that's how the what I call mental jujitsu takes place with all these writers that play around. Oh, eat fat, don't eat fat. Eat carbs, don't eat carbs. It's more complex, and if we learn the basics, and that's our entire intention.
Exactly.
Our entire life has been dedicated to this, whether it's science or clinical, is to kind of show the complexity in a way that's palatable, pardon the pun, as well as create meals and patterns that people can apply to their own life.
Right. It's complex.
It's complex, but it's doable.
But definitely doable.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to our second question. And I love this question too because it's very important. One of our friends asked us, what about diabetes medication? There's been a lot of research and a lot of hoopla about diabetes medication preventing Alzheimer's disease. So what do you think?
Yeah, so this is actually fairly new information that's coming to us. Just within the last 5 years or so, there were some studies that were done that patients who had diabetes type 2 and they were given intranasal insulin,
Yeah.
and it was a small sample.
So insulin outside and it's basically sprayed into the nose?
Sprayed into the nose, yes.
Okay.
A different approach than through injection or pill injection. And in that group, it was a small sample, they showed that the rate of cognitive decline actually slowed down.
Wow.
So now bigger studies are going on, and that was one of the first. Animal studies, there were many of them that had shown this relationship. Then other studies showed that people who had diabetes, yet they were placed on medication early on, their rate of decline was actually slower, significantly slower. Those are the epidemiological, what they call observational, what they call retrospective, meaning looking back. They're good studies. The best type of studies are prospective, where you actually take two populations, case and control, and you follow them forward, you apply the medicine or whatever intervention, and see the difference. Of late, when they've looked at other drugs like metformin, same thing. In a certain population, they saw that they had lower rate of decline and lower rate of Alzheimer's. Another group of drugs, which are called GLP-1 agonists, liraglutide and others, they also have shown a relationship between use of those drugs and cognitive health, maintaining cognitive health. So the question is whether these things are directly helping the brain or they're helping the brain by maintaining the glucose metabolism and helping the glucose metabolism. There's some evidence that there might be both of those mechanisms. There might be a direct effect when it comes to amyloid and all those, as well as inflammation, and an indirect effect by lowering the sugar and managing the glucose metabolism and that indirectly affecting the brain.
Okay.
Again, in science, 1, 2, 3 papers are not absolute. They have to be reproduced. They have to be repeated. But this gives us a signal that there is some evidence that maintaining better glucose through medication also helps. we always say that we're not against medicine.
Yeah.
Medicine has gotten us here where people live up to 80 years of age. We're about medicine in the short run, lifestyle for the long run. Sometimes the two have to superimpose, and that's why. So we're actually looking into this as well, looking at some medications and the relationship with diabetes and brain health. And I think throughout the country now people are looking at this, because if that's the case, by the way, there's some overstatements. This might be true later on, but I just read a major newspaper saying that is metformin the anti-aging drug. I mean, I don't know how they jumped from slowing down cognitive decline or damage to anti-aging, but that's the nature of media and people who want to jump on that. But managing the glucose levels early on, before it becomes insulin resistance, before it becomes diabetes, is critical through lifestyle.
Yeah.
But if you have it, treat it well, be treated by somebody who knows how to treat it well, and then institute lifestyle on top so that it can take over.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Okay, the other question is, oh God, I love this question. So one of our friends said, I love sweets. What should I do?
No, we never hear this.
Well, I totally relate with you, whoever said this question, because I love sweets myself. I absolutely love dessert. I mean, I grew up around chocolates and cakes and pastries, and I was 9 years old, and I would buy these recipe books, and I would bake cakes and cookies, and I had this amazing love for dessert. So that's totally understandable. And what we're trying to say, and what we're trying to disperse, is not a lifestyle of deprivation. That's the worst type of lifestyle.
That's failure.
Yeah, exactly. The reason why people fail, the reason why diets don't work, and the reason why all these different courses on intensive mechanisms don't work is because it doesn't fit anybody's lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so deprivation is not what we're trying to point towards. There's so many other options of actually living a very healthy life, having your dessert and having a healthy brain as well. And it's quite a long discussion. You can actually find a lot more information in our book, but to put it in a nutshell, it's best to get your sweetness from fruits.
Correct.
So even if you want to have dessert, you can usually use fruit pastes.
Yeah, but not fruit juice, because
Exactly.
that's all basically distilled sugar.
Correct, and that's why I said blended pastes or fruit paste. So date paste or date sugar, which is actually pure date that is pulverized into
Correct.
powder. So you have the vitamins and the fibers and all the phytonutrients in there as well. That's fine. I actually have created so many cookies and cakes for the family.
I can attest to that. Yes.
Using date sugar and fruit pastes for different kinds of desserts. So, we just have to get a little more creative and expand our horizon and not grocery aisles, and kind of look at other options as well. And trust me, there are so many wonderfully delicious things that you can have.
So, Aish has this key lime pie.
Key lime pie, yeah.
Which is my favorite thing in the planet, and it's taking something that's bad for you and reversing it into a health food. The crust is made of
walnuts and
dates, and the sugar comes from natural fruits and erythritol, and it's the best thing you can eat. You can actually get that in the book, and we also have a video of it coming up as well.
Absolutely, I can't wait to share it with all of you.
The idea here is, it's very important that we kind of educate ourselves and learn a little bit more about what's out there, what are the things that are bad, and create a system in the house, and we'll talk about that.
Correct.
Where healthy food is available, is accessible, and we can make it all the time. Because anything short of that, we will all, within the next few years, I mean, we've seen the graphs where the map of the country as far as health was 3 states that were unhealthy in 1990.
Yeah.
Now there are only 2 states that are healthy.
Yeah.
That's how fast it has gone. So we're all going to be affected by this. Marketing is strong. They're good at their marketing. So the only thing we can do is educate ourselves and make healthy tasty operative term, tasty food available to all of our, to ourselves, to our families.
Very true. It's not going to happen if it's not tasty.
It is not going to happen.
It has to be able to compete with Dunkin' Donuts.
It has to, definitely. And especially with kids. Although this is about Alzheimer's, on the other end of the spectrum, we have 2 kids. Are you kidding? Living with kids, not giving them sweets?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we think one of the worst things for kids is the amount of sugar that's in their diet.
Yeah.
And then we give them these titles, ADHD, and that's such a crime. And then we medicate it. Well, that's a different topic. I know we're going to get some pushback on that, but really, that's a big problem. So yeah, those are the concepts around sugar.
Right.
If you want more information, there's plenty available in our book.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, if you pre-order our book, you can actually download a recipe packet from our website that we've put together. I think it's amazing.
Yes.
It comes with 10 beautiful recipes, including desserts, and then you'll have access to the recipe videos as well. So check it out on our website.
And if they sign up for our newsletter, they'll get regular videos and information on this stuff as well.
Yes, if you sign up on our website, we will keep you informed about any updates that come on. Let's address the last question.
Yes.
So somebody asked us about artificial sugars and the brain.
That's as much as it's controversial for the rest of the body, it's even more controversial for a brain. The data is not very good at this point. Now, that's changing. Just this last week, a paper came out that showed that the artificial sweeteners may be inversely correlated with dementia, meaning but directly correlated, meaning that if you use high amounts of artificial sweeteners, there's higher chance of dementia. Again, that needs to be reproduced. There has to be more data coming, and making sure that there's enough funding for that kind of research to be done. That's a different topic, but so there's some evidence that there seems to be a negative relationship. The reason I'm hedging is because as scientists, we have to go with the data available.
Correct.
There isn't a mountain of evidence, but there is enough there for us to kind of be cautious. Definitely not for kids. We don't give it for kids, and we try to avoid it as much as possible. In our family, once in a while, there's one person, one culprit that once a week, when we go to a restaurant, has a diet drink.
We're not going to say who it is.
We're not going to say who it is, but the idea is to stay away from it because there's already enough evidence to give you pause, to make and it's worrisome. And we now know that there are other mechanisms that whenever you affect the sweet centers of the brain, that actually starts a whole other cascade, be it hunger. There's evidence that people who drink soft drinks, they actually crave more food.
Yes.
So it affects their ability to lose weight.
Yeah.
And also in the brain as well. So let's wait for more data. But at this point, in our family, we try to stay away from artificial sweeteners, except a few that are natural, such as stevia.
Stevia? Yes, stevia. I mean, there's really no data that points towards stevia being bad for the brain.
No strong data. No.
The only sweetener that actually has been studied with regards to depression and emotions is aspartame.
Correct.
And there were a couple of papers, like you said,
with dementia as well.
With dementia as well.
Yeah.
But stevia and another one that's called erythritol. It's one of those rare artificial sugars that actually has an anti-inflammatory aspect to it. But again, it was a small study and it has to be replicated before we can, have confidence in it.
Yeah, and enough people are getting confidence in it that now all these other companies are putting them into their foods. But we're not pushing it because there isn't enough data. If you can stay away from the artificial sweeteners,
yes.
do so.
Yes.
If you can't, if you need it, then stevia and erythritol are fine. But fruit pastes such as date and others are great.
Dates, applesauce. I mean, my goodness, there's so many fruit pastes now available.
Correct.
I mean, you can actually make it yourself as well, and they're quite delicious, and it comes with all the goodness of the fruits.
Correct.
As well.
Correct.
I guess that's it for us today. It's 6:30. We promised we were going to end it at 30 minutes, and we're on time. So again, thank you so much for joining us. You can actually get our book on our website, teamshareseye.com. And if you have any questions, like always, please post them. We really love hearing back from you.
Absolutely.
And your thoughts. This is an open forum. We actually learn a lot from your questions. We will come back to you next week with another topic. We'll let you know what that is.
Absolutely.
And am I forgetting anything?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Get our book.
Get our book. Have a great day.
Thank
Thanks.
you.